friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams today for the rest of my June wrap-up. Today is July 7th, which is my birthday. Woohoo! I already have some wonderful things to haul for you that people have been sending me, which is so incredibly sweet. But I'm headed soon to go to my cousin's house to celebrate the day and go swimming in her pool and read a book in her hammock and eat loaded waffles and just relax and have a wonderful day. So I wanted to get this filmed quickly so that I can finish up June and get that off of my mind. So it's kind of like a to-do list item, but I didn't want to wait until Thursday or later in the week to film this and get it up. And I wanted to say hello on my birthday because you guys have already been making it so special for me. I just wanted to spend part of my day here in this space, in this hobby with people that I love, you guys. So I do have 5 more books that I read at the end of June. I talked about 6 books I think at the beginning of the month, and I have 5 more. So I read 11 altogether, and I would say it was a really wonderful reading month. 2 surprises that I'm going to talk about soon. A series that I've been working my way through. I read 2 more of those at the end of the month. So it's just been a really great reading month. Lots of audiobooks in June, and let's just jump right in. So the first 2 I'm going to talk about, I don't actually own because I listen to them on audio, and they're books 5 and 6 in the Hagenheim series by Melanie Dickerson. This is a Christian YA kind of fantasy, somewhat fairy tale retelling series that I've been making my way through. I did read book 5 and 6. Book 5 is The Princess Spy, and book 6 is The Golden Braid. Book 6 is very clearly a Rapunzel retelling. I mean, it's about this woman with really long golden hair, and her name is even Rapunzel. Book 5, The Princess Spy, I don't know that it's a direct retelling of any fairy tale that I'm familiar with. It might be. I didn't look it up to see if it was. I gave both of these books 3 stars. I'm enjoying this series. It's not blowing me away. It's just a lot of fun. They've been light, and the romance is sweet, and I've really been enjoying them. I do plan on finishing the series. Unfortunately, Hoopla, which is how I've been listening to them, does not have any of the series that I've been working on. The Louise Penny series, I read the second earlier this month in the Maisie Dobbs series, and then I've been working through the Hagenheim series. None of those 3 series are on Hoopla this month. I'm hoping that changes in the future because I really have enjoyed listening to these on audio. I do want to continue, at least for this wrap up, with a quote from each of the books that I read. A lot of you really enjoyed that at the beginning of the month in my first part of June wrap up. I had a couple people who didn't care for it, and that's okay. I'm not sure it's going to be something that I always will continue, but I do have a ton of blank notebooks, and I feel like I should at least write down this one quote that I've kind of pulled out as I've been reading. It's a little harder with audiobooks. I can bookmark a spot to come back to and listen and write it down, so I can do that, but it is much easier with print books to mark quotes. But for The Princess Spy, the quote that I found is kind of funny, being an older single person and sometimes feeling a little picky. It says, if only she could find someone as perfect as her father. He made every other man she'd ever met seem unworthy. Perhaps this was the reason she never found a suitor very appealing. She always compared him to her father. I know that I've probably mentioned it before. My dad passed away when I was 21, and he was by far not a perfect man, but definitely somebody to look up to, and definitely somebody that I have thought about in potential suitors and how they kind of measure up, and maybe that's why I'm still single on my 44th birthday. I don't know. And the quote that I want to say from The Golden Braid is, a man could only love her imperfectly, but God could give her the perfect love she desired. Lady Rose had learned to comfort her husband in his pain instead of expecting him to heal her own. And I just love that because sometimes I hope that somebody else will come into my life, but not because I have that hole that needs to be filled by a man, but because I want us to be able to walk through life together. And sometimes we expect other people to heal our pain, and really God is the only one that can do that. So I loved those 2 quotes that kind of deal with a little bit of relationship stuff in those 2. But then moving on, I had 2 4-star reads. One I did as a buddy read in a group on Instagram, and it was such a surprise to me. I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. I was not prepared to really enjoy this at all, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. In this book, we follow Cassandra, who's a 17-year-old girl, and she's kind of writing in her journal. So we really hear her voice and get to hear her perspective on things. Her family is living in this castle, but it's very run down. They're very poor, don't have enough to eat, don't have like new clothes. Their clothes are pretty ratty. The dad had a big hit. He's an author and had a really big hit in one book, but then has not been able to write anything since. And so we're just kind of learning about this family through the eyes of Cassandra. The owners of the castle that they're renting show up one day, or the sons of the owner, and kind of not cause chaos, but the 2 sisters, Cassandra and her older sister, their lives are forever changed because of these young men that enter their lives. And it's delightful and heartwarming at the beginning. In the midst of all, it has a humor to it, which I really appreciate. There's a lot of kind of funny parts, which were a lot of fun. I had seen this movie, and I did not like the movie. And as I got towards the end of the book, I remembered why I did not like this movie. People make choices and decisions that just really were frustrating for me. And it makes sense, and I'm not sad about how it all ended, but it wasn't my preferred kind of way I would have hoped things would wrap up, I guess. It's hard to say that, right? Not everybody's going to act the way that I want them to, clearly. I did really enjoy this book much more than I thought, and I did end up giving it 4 stars. I thought her voice, Cassandra's voice, was really delightful. I loved hearing her perspective on things. There's a guy, Steven, that lives with them. He's like a family friend. He's lived with them for a long time. He is like the sole provider of the family for a little while, even though it's not much. He's young. He's Cassandra's age. And I just absolutely loved Steven. He was my favorite character in this book, for sure. And I loved Cassandra and her voice. Once romance entered the picture, I was not thrilled anymore, but that's okay. It was still just very much a fun surprise, and I'm so glad that I read it with that group of ladies on Instagram. It was fun hearing other people's thoughts along the way as well. Such a good surprise for this summer. Really glad I read that one. The quote that I pulled out from this one is, "Perhaps watching someone you love suffer can teach you even more than suffering yourself can." Oh, I just thought that was a good thought to have. Perspective is always a hard thing to have when you're in the midst of suffering, and helping someone else walk through their situation might help to have perspective on our own situations. I just thought that was a really insightful thought to ponder for that one. And moving on, the other 4-star book that I read this month was Necessary Lies by Diane Chamberlain. Diane Chamberlain is one of the authors I wanted to read this year, and I read 2 of her books in June, so that's kind of fun. I listened to this one on audio during my long car ride to New York earlier in the month, well, in the middle of June, I guess, and this was so good. Very different from The Dream Daughter. It doesn't deal at all with time travel or anything magical realism. It's very contemporary. Well, I shouldn't say contemporary. It's kind of historical because it takes place in the 1960s, 70s? 1960 in North Carolina. And this young woman is about to get married at the beginning, and during that time, the expected role of a young bride is to kind of be at home with her husband and make sure dinner is on the table and to look pretty and to attend the country club with him. And she doesn't want to have that life. She wants to work and has gone to school and has a degree, and so she gets a job as a social worker, and she travels into a very poverty-stricken neighborhood and becomes a social worker. And her husband is kind of dragging his feet about it. He's not thrilled about this idea of his wife working, and he's kind of a jerk, to be honest, all the way through the book. He's horrible. They kind of have the same argument over and over, which is kind of annoying. She herself, Jane, is quite naive, and that also became a little bit annoying as the book went on, but it just was part of her personality. So she was just super naive and did not handle situations very well. She worked in a very poverty-stricken neighborhood, both with poor white families and black families, and part of the main idea of this book is that during that time in North Carolina, forced sterilization or euthanization was a very big thing that social workers kind of pressed for. And so that was the main struggle of conflict of this book, is that Jane became very close with some of her clients, some of her cases and their families, and was being very pressured to fill out requests for sterilization of some of these very young girls. And she really fought back against that. She didn't understand why, and she wanted it to be the choice of these girls and not forced upon them. And that was the big conflict of this book. So it's not something that I had ever thought about before or knew about. So it was very interesting to learn that that's kind of how social work was handled in some of these cases in North Carolina in particular, even after World War II, when Hitler and his Nazi euthanization policies and all of that, North Carolina was one of the last states to change their policy and their laws and their way of doing things. So it was really eye-opening and heartbreaking, and it was just done so thoughtfully. It was a difficult read at times, but I really liked Diane Chamberlain. I'm very excited to read more from her. This is only my second one, and I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was really good. The quote from this one that I pulled out says, "When you see a picture of the ocean, it's cut off at the edges. You know it goes on and on to the right and on to the left, but you never really know how it feels to see that until you actually do see it." And I love that, because sometimes we have a picture of something in our minds and we know that the picture is more than just the snapshot that we can see. But until you're there seeing it and experiencing it for yourself, you don't really fully know. And so I thought that was a cool quote. This was kind of a very eye-opening and insightful book, and I am really glad that I read it. 4 stars. Wonderful. And finally, probably my favorite book of the month. I read a lot of good books this month, but I had another surprise this month, and I know I talked about it in my mid-year wrap-up or my mid-year freak-out tag, but I read A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles this month. I read this as a buddy read with Amanda from The Curly Reader. We participated in Book Buddy-a-thon, which I ended up not really participating in that much, but I did talk to Amanda all the time, and I did buddy read a book with her, and so that's a kind of a win. I just didn't do a lot of the other challenges. I did a couple of them, but not all of them. And this one was quite a surprise, even more than I Capture the Castle, because I heard just about everybody and their brother say that they loved this book and that they wanted to give it a big hug, and it just was so wonderful. And every time someone would describe it, I just wasn't convinced that it was going to be a book for me. I'm like, that just sounds kind of boring. It's about this man in a hotel and he doesn't go anywhere or do anything. How can that be a good book? Well, let me tell you, I was so pleasantly surprised because it was fabulous. I just loved this book. So we follow Count Alexander Rostov, who is sentenced to the rest of his life to live out in this hotel in Moscow. He is part of the elite kind of genteel class in Russia, and after following the revolution, the Bolsheviks are now in power, and it's kind of like the whole beginning of communism in Russia, and the elite class was often killed off or sentenced or exiled or put in a hotel and told that they can't leave ever. So we follow Count Rostov in this hotel and the relationships that he makes with the staff and other people in the hotel. And he himself is just such a remarkable character. The way that he treats other people with such respect, the way that he reflects on the situations that he comes across, the way that he talks with other people, his personality is just wonderful. It's a little bit cheeky, a little bit humorous and witty, and so incredibly intelligent, and that's how this book is written. So intelligently, so like tongue-in-cheek at times. You feel smarter for reading it. I feel like I learned a lot about the history of Russia during this time, but it's not a strict historical fiction. Like, it's really about this man's life and kind of his response to everything that's going around him in his country, and how he reflects on that and his ups and downs, his good days and his bad days, and the inner workings of this hotel. I don't know, it just it was so much more than I expected it to be, and I really thought it was wonderful. And so many things that I underlined, especially at the beginning. Once I get into a story, I forget to underline things, but there were quite a few quotes and things throughout that I just thought were wonderful. And so I will read one of them now. It's a little bit longer, and it says, "After all, what can a first impression tell us about someone we've just met for a minute in the lobby of a hotel? For that matter, what can a first impression tell us about anyone? Why, no more than a chord can tell us about Beethoven or a brushstroke about Botticelli. By their very nature, human beings are so capricious, so complex, so delightfully contradictory that they deserve not only our consideration, but our reconsideration and our unwavering determination to withhold our opinion until we have engaged with them in every possible setting at every possible hour." And I just love that we are so much more than our first impressions. I love this book. It is definitely one that I could reread. I really appreciate all of you who said that you loved it all the time. I was able to participate in a Zoom meeting with the author Amor Towles that Katie from Life Between Words hosted. And it was I always love listening to authors. I always love hearing their thought process and their writing process, and Amor Towles was just a remarkable man. It lasted an hour and a half, and I honestly could have listened to him for another hour and a half beyond that. It was just so insightful and interesting to hear him, and I really loved this book. I have read Rules of Civility, but I liked this one more than Rules of Civility for sure. But he is definitely an author to keep my eye on, and I will read more from him for sure in the future. So this was a lovely book, and such a surprise, and a definite 5 stars. And with that, I'm finished. I'm gonna wrap this up, quickly edit this video, get it posted so that I can head out to my cousin's house and enjoy the day in the pool and reading, and loaded waffles they're coming my way. Thank you so much for watching. I would love to chat with you in the comments down below about these books that I read, about anything else that you want to chat about. I look forward to talking to you down there, and thank you so much for being such a joy in my life. I love you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.